Let's tank Argus in Antorus on Mythic difficulty. Now for this strat we're going to do a 3 tank strat and 3 phases to this fight. The fight needs to be executed perfectly pretty much or you ain't going to make the DPS checks, and it's a pretty hectic fight overall. It's one of the harder fights I've probably ever done. So let's have a look at phase 1. So the general strat for phase 1 is we're going to be walking the boss backwards through the room at an angle to keep the middle of the room clear of fog, and we're going to be baiting as a raid the Cone of Death straight behind the boss and walking the boss backwards. Now we'll probably get 4 to 5 of these depending on how your damage is, and we're going to be pre-potting on the pull and potting halfway through this phase just to get as much damage on the boss as possible. Now speaking of damage, the orbs, what we did is we had a weak aura and we dropped the haste orb to the left and the crit orb to the right. Now it's important that you're trying to stack the buff as much as possible. This goes for yourself as tanks and the raiders, DPS and even the healers, just to be pumping out as much damage into the boss as possible, and that's because we need to be making a DPS check. Now before I talk about the DPS check, let me just explain the new mechanic of this fight, and that is pretty much the fear and the rage circles. Now what these do is they'll put on random raid members red circles. They can tell these apart by the one's pointy, has little points on it, and one's just plain circle. Now the pointed ones need to be away from players, and the plain circular ones, you want people stacked on these players to escort them. Now this becomes vital when the buff reapplies and adds 1 extra one of each to the raid, as you don't want to be getting rage stacks on people or players in the raid, as this will cause your healers to start overhealing players and getting low on the mana and not being able to keep up with the healing check. So basically, one debuff is pointy and the other debuffs are circles. So pointy ones don't stand in, circular ones stand in and escort these players. Real simple. So this debuff is actually on a timer throughout the fight and they keep getting applied, and every time it applies they all disappear and then an extra one is added for each. So say you had 1 rage and 2 fears, they'll all disappear and then you'll get 2 rage and 3 or 4 fears. And this keeps applying and keeps stacking up until obviously you have lows and you can't handle them anymore. So the goal of phase 1 is to only have this reapply once. If you're getting it twice, you need to re-evaluate your damage a little bit. You can manage to do it with the extra or the 3rd rage, but it makes it a lot harder getting into the last phase. So the goal of this phase is just to be that 2nd application of this debuff. Now as for tanking in this phase, you just want to be taunting on 2 scythes and trying to keep as much buff up time as you possibly can. Sometimes you may want to go to a 3rd if it means that one of the tanks can actually keep his stacks high, or you can also get the 3rd tank just to help out at certain times in the fight if needed. It's up to you guys how you do this, but I just recommend taunting at 2. And on the 2nd scythe, make sure you have some kind of cooldown up. The 1st scythe you can pretty much take unmitigated. The 2nd one you need to have something kind of active, as it does hit kind of hard. Apart from that, on the Cone of Death you just want to be walking the boss back 5 to 10 yards, depending on how your raid is and how they handle not standing in the fog. And if you're not tanking the boss, you can help escort players with the 3rd debuff. And pretty much what we did with the 3rd tank is when the debuffs were dropping and reapplying, we'd just have him help escort out. We'd also help him escort out the Soul Blight players as well when needed. Apart from this, all you really need to know is your position don't really matter too much when you're not tanking the boss, as Cone of Death doesn't target tanks, so you don't really need to worry about baiting it so much. All you need to worry about is either getting ready to taunt, keeping your orb buffs up as much as possible to get as much damage up as possible, and making sure you're not getting hit by scythe if you get too close to the boss when you're not meant to be. Apart from that, that's phase 1, and the boss transitions at 70% health, and at this point you just want to drag the boss to the middle of the room, making sure to still be escorting the fear debuffs and not taking any stacks off the rage debuffs. Now the tank who takes the boss in this phase will be the first one to get Agrimar's boon, which is the big shield, and for this you need to have a tank who's got like either the Agrimar trinket or the Archon's hatred and has all cooldowns up, because they're going to be taking a big burst of damage because they need to escort the big bomb and the 2 little bombs out that are also in heroic, take them away from the raid and pop all the cooldowns just to be able to survive it. And you really need this tank to survive, as you need all 3 tanks up at this point. Now while this is happening, your other 2 tanks will still be taunting at 2 stacks, and you need to be dodging the scythes, as the dot that the scythe does, if it hits you, it leaves a nasty debuff and it ticks down really hard, and if you do get hit by this, you're going to need some kind of cooldown, or you're going to have to stand in Agrimar's boon and damage the other tank who currently has it, which might waste a cooldown that he may need later on in the fight. Now the second Agrimar's boon that happens will happen or be applied to one of the 2 tanks who are currently taunt swapping between the boss. It won't go on the tank that just had it, but it's pretty random on which tank it'll go on. I tried to put different videos up of what happened, but we'll see what footage I can actually find for this bit. So this bit's pretty random. So what we actually do with the big bomb is we just sacrifice this player, and if you've got a shaman, you can put a res totem down for them. If not, just let them sacrifice, and that's it. They're just out of the fight till last phase. The 2 little bombs stay in, and we put an SLT down or some kind of healing cooldown, and the healers just heal through the damage. Now the next big bomb that comes is the sacrifice one, or the one I call sacrifice, and the tank just goes out. Pop a minor cooldown, you don't need anything too mad, you just need to be able to escort these players out and not die in the way, and let all the players just blow up on you. That'll end up killing you, but it doesn't matter at this point as the other 2 tanks can handle the rest of the fight. And just after this, the boss should be transitioning if your DPS is on point. On the enrage timer, you want roughly 6 minutes 45 to 6 minutes 30 for the boss to be transitioning and starting his RP. If anything else, then your bloodlust might not be back off cooldown in time, and you'll be really pushing the enrage timer. Now, the only other real tips I can give for this phase is you want your DPS to try to bait out the scythes as much as possible and keep them away from the middle of the room where the tank's going to have his boon. This helps a little bit, but you really need to get good at dodging the scythes and know how they kind of work and the delay they have before they actually activate. You do have a few seconds to run through them. However, just look to the sides where they spawn before the black line comes, and you can kind of predict where they're going to be going towards and pre-move them so you're in a safe zone. Now, if you're one with the Agramars boon, make sure you're also dodging scythes and make sure you have some kind of minor CD running while you have all the raid in you, in case some of these players do have scythe debuffs or rage stacks, because this will tick you down, and when the bombs actually blow up on you, this could end up actually killing you, as it is quite a lot of damage that adds up, and the healers are already pretty strained at this point of the fight. Now, at 40% health, the boss does transition, and at this point, everyone gets killed in the raid, so we just stack up and let everyone die. As to reset, prolonged pots or any damage pots you have for the last phase. Now, after some RP, you get to release and run to the tree like you do in Heroic and Normal, and you really need to be watching out for ghosts, because if you hit a ghost and knock a lot of damage dealers back, you're going to lose a lot of damage on the actual boss, so make sure you're being extra wary when you're down below not to hit any ghosts, as this will probably make you wipe to enrage later on in the fight. So that's your priority one here. Dodge ghosts, get into the tree, even if it costs you a second or two, just to let a ghost past or go the long way round. Once you res, you want to be putting prolonged power or something like that, whatever you use to get as much damage up, and some damage cooldowns. In the video you notice I don't, as I use my DPS cooldown as a defensive as well, so I use that later on, which we'll talk about in a little bit of time. You then want to position the boss against the wall and get ready for the first orb and scythes to come. So let's first have a look at the scythes in the last phase. The goal here is to take 5, and on the 5th one you're going to be dying. So for this you need to have some kind of cooldown rotation. Personally, what I did for the first one, I didn't really use anything, maybe a iron fur or something. The second one, just before it went out, I'd pop a bark skin, and then this would then carry over to the 3rd scythe, to which I'd then pop Rage of the Sleeper and my Archimon's trinket. And the 4th one, I pop some Iron Furs and Survival Instincts. And then on the 5th one, I'm actually dying, so you don't really need anything. You just need to be able to survive till actually get the scythe. Make sure you don't have anything up for it, as you don't want to be surviving this. And that's because of the orbs that spawn from the scythe. Now, for every stack you have, you're going to spawn an orb. So say you have no stacks and you get hit once, you spawn 1 orb. The second time, when it goes to 2, you spawn 2. 3, you spawn 3 orbs. 4, 4, 5, 5. But obviously, if you die from this, you don't spawn any orbs, which is great. Which is why we die in the 5th one, as this is pretty much the happy medium on this fight, and it just makes sure the orbs don't get out of control. Now, as the off tanks in this fight, you want to be soaking the red orbs that spawn. You need to have some kind of cooldown up when you're soaking them, as they hit for about, I'd say, 8 million. So if you take 2 with no cooldown, you're going to die. So our 3rd tank in this fight was a Blood DK. He popped the ring on just to have rune tap, and he'd just run around soaking all these little orbs. As the other tank, who's also going to be taunting the boss, you can help out, but you don't really want to be using your cooldowns too much. So just soak 1, maybe 2 orbs just to help out. For an example, on our kill, the Blood Death Knight had around 60 soaks, and the other 2 tanks had about 10, just to give you a kind of heads up of what they should actually be doing and how many should be soaking. Now, for tank deaths, the first tank to die, who takes the boss initially in this last phase, is going to use the tree to res, as this won't really affect the strat we're going to be doing with the res in a little bit of time where everyone reses together. The second tank, which is me in the video, I just stay down there, and at this point you're just waiting and collecting the little orbs that are down to help get the Titan Forge buff up with the other player. And then I believe it's the second set of chains on the raid that come out. That's where everyone's going to be dying, and you res with them players. And at this point, the tree's just going to disappear totally. And at this point, you're going to be using battle reses and shaman totem if you've got it available to get you back up and alive in the fight. Now, when you're down there, as I said, just collect any orbs, as this will give you the Titan Forge buff quicker, and you should have a player already down there gathering them. You want this player to pretty much pop the cooldowns on the start of the pull, get as much damage up straight away, and then be dying pretty much to the scythes and down there straight away collecting orbs to get the Titan Forge buff up as quick as possible, as this will increase your raid's overall DPS rather than having them up. Now, the only time you don't really want to consider resing a tank is probably in the last 10%. Say the tank dies and you've got a res up, you may want to consider getting a DPS up over the tank depending on the current tank stacks. Say they have 3 or 4, may want to consider getting the tank up or having the third tank taunting and swapping who gets the orbs. This is up to you, and you can pretty much work it out as you get into that phase in the fight though. And that's pretty much it for the tank scythes and the resin. Now let's have a look at the new mechanics in the fight. Now the first one we'll talk about is the orb that spawns, and this is on a timer, and what you want to do is you get all your raid to bait it. You want to have a player marked, we mark someone X, and they're going to stand on the right foot. Everyone gets there, apart from the rages obviously, as they'll put stacks on people. Everyone baits it, it spawns, everyone swaps to it, kills it as quick as possible. The longer it's up, the bigger the circle is, and this circle stays for the remainder of the fight. And you move the boss to just be pretty much next to it, and you want him to facing the fog that spawned from it and pretty much facing it into the corner. This is just to make it easier if you've got a lot of melee with the rage debuff, just so they can all keep up the damage as long as possible. Just make sure before you move the boss that you actually just give a heads up to any melee that might be in scythe range, and you're doing it between the scythes. So a scythe goes out, then you want to move the boss straight away. If a scythe's going to happen before you've got the boss in the position, just quickly turn the boss to face the wall, just so the scythe isn't going to hit anyone in the raid. I tended to overrun it a lot, as sometimes you're moving the boss as the orb's still putting out like a circle, and it's better to overrun that underrun and still be in the fog and having to reposition again, as this will lose a lot of damage from the melee not being in the right position. So just overrun it a little bit and then reposition accordingly. Just make sure you've got the boss nice and tucked away in the corner so that you can bait the next orb that spawns pretty much on top of the last fog, and you want to keep rinsing and repeating this all the way around the room. And the other new mechanic for us as tanks to worry about are the scythes that spawn around the room. Now these take up 50% of the room, so if they're not on your side of the room you don't have to worry about it, but when they do swap to the other side of the room, this is when you need to worry about the scythes. Now the scythes may look complicated in videos, but they're actually really simple. Now what happens is when they spawn, they're either going to be standing still or they're going to start to spin. If they're going to start to spin, you want to get off them and into the gaps between the scythes. If they're not spinning, you want to be on top of the scythe. You pretty much only want to ever be not on top of our scythe if it's spinning, otherwise you're just going to be in the gap between it. So once again, if it's stationary, just be on top of it, as a scythe's probably going to be going in between the gap, and when it starts to spin, just get in between the gap. Now once you see the scythe go between the gap, you're more than welcome to just get into the gap it just went into, as the scythes that you're just on are just about to start spinning anyway. It may seem hard at first, but it's really simple. It may take you a few pulls to get it down, but again, it's really simple mechanic. Just make sure if you've got the boss at the time that if you need to turn the boss a little bit, you're just letting the melee know you need to turn to get into a gap, but they should also be aware of this. Now, if you're not tanking the boss at this point, what your goal here is to be protecting the melee and the range groups that are dodging scythes currently from red orbs that are spawning off the tank currently tanking. Now, if you really need to, you can call for a bop, and what this will do is make you immune to the scythe damage and also the orb damage that happens. So it's a good idea to just get into the habit of using bops if needed, but if you don't need one, as like say the orb's quite far away or you've already procced it, just let the paladin know you're not going to be needing one. If you do, just call for it. Real simple stuff. And apart from that, once the scythes went out, you pretty much want raw, as one of the orb abilities will be coming up where you need to bait it. And that's pretty much it for the scythes. Nothing too crazy. And finally, the last mechanic that's new to the fight that you should be aware of, as it could go on you, but it's nothing that's really going to impact your tank in this fight, is the chains debuff that happens. And all this does is players get chained and you need to break these chains. Now, when they break in, they do a lot of damage to the raid. So you can either break 2 at once and then break the rest off singly, and the healers are going to be using healing cooldowns at this time. You just need to be aware of this, as chains can go on one of the tanks, especially during the sacrifice period where everyone's going to be dying, and if you mess up the chain point, the tank who's currently up can get chains, and they'll also need to be breaking the chain. So if you're still up there and you do get chains, just be aware of what you need to do, and you just need to run out, break the chain, and this is going to explode and deal damage to the raid. So obviously, don't be breaking the chain if the raid's low, as you're going to end up killing them. And also be aware if you're the one taking the boss at the time the chains are breaking that you're going to be taking a little bit of extra damage, so just incorporate that into your CDs if you need to. Now apart from that, that's pretty much the fight, guys. It's probably one of the harder Mythic fights I've ever had to do. It's definitely up there for one of the tougher fights I've had to do, and definitely up there for one of the more enjoyable ones as well. As always, thanks for watching my guide, and please like, comment and subscribe for more videos.